the recording. We've started.
Cool.
All right. Everybody, hi, welcome. This is going to be a great webinar. I'm really excited to have you, Jenny. So we are going to get started in 1 second. Quick up top reminders. Please use the Q&A box for your questions, and you'll be taking it away from here. That's it. That was it. All that build up for that. Okay, here you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenni Schlak. I am a development executive producer. Sometimes I work as just a producer on the production side. I'm actually doing an advertising campaign at Condé Nast right now. So my work kind of spans all genres, but I do specialize in unscripted and documentary nonfiction development. So I would love to share what I know with you guys today and answer anything I can to help you with that. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Is that right, Brianna? I think so.
Yes. Yeah. You're good.
Great. Okay. Perfect. And let me make this full screen, which is here. Cool. So I'm just going to kind of start off by with some terms that you should not overlook on how to use and using when you're speaking to people in the industry, whether it be someone you're pitching, an editor you're working with. Anyone tends to use these terms. I will say as you get down to VOD and SVOD, people are still learning because we are moving into a new frontier of television. But linear television is basically what you have thought of as television forever. It has a time when it airs and it's pretty conventional. It's not streaming, basically. All broadcast counts as linear TV. Over the top is a new delivery type of service. Sling TV, Netflix, channel-specific apps. It has to be transported from the video provider to a connected device over the internet. Many people feel that over the top is the only way we're going to be getting TV in the next few years, but some people feel that there's a place for cable television. And that's one of the big debates in the industry right now about where we're moving. And then we've got VOD and SVOD, video on demand or subscription video on demand. That also Netflix counts as both. There's a lot of these terms sometimes that can cover multiple services, but just know that on video on demand, there's also each network has a video on demand thing as well. And this is really more about these terms are for how you talk about the show you want to produce or how you're talking about a show that exists already. So a show can be arced, which is where the storylines continue from one episode to the next. You know, that's the modern sitcom. We've always kind of known that. The self-contained closed-ended is a standalone episode. The viewer does not need to see the previous episode to be caught up. And this is very popular in the cable industry because there's a low viewer buy-in. You can jump through and you can see it on the programming chart and say, oh, I don't need to know what's happening. I can jump right in. So this is probably the most popular format type of show that cable networks are going to be looking to buy for that reason alone. And then there's a format which relies on tentpole moments in every episode. So it can either be self-contained or arced. So for example, an arced format would be Survivor. Everything happens the same every season. Everything happens the same every episode, but it happens over a season. Whereas self-contained, at the end of each episode, it's over, you move on. And then there's another couple terms you want to know is docu, which is rooted in documentary. They appear to follow events as they happen, but they're actually typically highly produced and planned. So Housewives franchise, Kardashians are docu-soaps. And then there's the hybrid type of show, which feels like a docu-series, but every episode the same thing happens. So there's a format element built into that. So all of these terms can sometimes overlap, but are all going to be helpful in figuring out the structure of the show that you want to produce and how to sell it and how to talk about it. Oops, I didn't really finish the slide. Sorry, guys. I meant to figure that out. One thing to know is when you're thinking about a show, first thing I always ask myself is, why isn't this on television already? Currently, that means a little less than it did 2 or 3 years ago because of this new digital explosion of outlets that we're able to pitch to, but it's still a very good question to ask. Why isn't this on TV already? There could be a million reasons, but be honest with yourself about why someone's been told no before. When you are looking to produce, and as you become a more seasoned producer, you're going to get some network mandates. Mandates are breakdowns of what networks are looking for. But you can also look at a network and figure out what a network mandate might be. They're broken down into categories or buckets. So we're looking for car shows. We're looking for hosted paranormal shows, true crime investigations. So they really do think about exactly the type of shows they want to buy, and they think about the percentage of those they're going to buy. Some years I know, like Travel Channel right now is buying 70% hosted paranormal shows. That's wild. You would never have guessed that. And that will change year to year based on, you know, what their advertisers tell them that they want to be on that network. But just know that, you know, these things will change. And once you get that insider knowledge, you can then know better where to pitch to. But you can also get this knowledge by observing and, you know, going to network events, meeting these network executives, talking to them and developing these relationships. And as you go forward, you know, you're not going to need to send a fully polished idea to your network exec. You're going to be able to send them one sheets that kind of tell them what the show is, or a log line to help you determine where to best invest your development energy. So if you get a pitch meeting, the chance is it's not a chance to bounce ideas around. You want to come in with a vision, because even if they don't buy this vision, they want to know you as a vision person. If you're waffling all over the place, they can get anybody to do that. They need someone to come in and say, this is what I want to create, and here's why your audience needs it. You should always have a good title, but the odds are this will change, so don't get too precious about it. It doesn't mean you can come in with a boring title, but just don't get too attached to it. Make sure you know the genres, the styles, and the structures of Unscripted, because they might say, we really like this show, but can you make it into a docu-soap? And you're like, well, this is a game show. I don't really know how to do that. And you have to be able to figure out and pivot creatively in conversation how you can make your show fit what their current need might be that you aren't aware of until you get in that room. So in general, though, networks look for series that are replicatable, repeatable, and close-ended. A key question is, what happens in every episode? It's very simple and it sounds obvious, but I guarantee if you go through a pitch that you put together you think is good, there's a hole just like that in it, like not answering what happens in every episode and answering it early on in the pitch. So basically, the overall goal of your pitch is to leave executives with a complete vision that stands out from the 1,000 other pitches they see this year. Explain how you'll execute the idea and bring it to reality. And a lot of people always ask, what is producing? And it's a very nebulous question, but I would say it's putting together a package worthy of $150,000 to a $5 million investment, which is really, truly what you're asking for. You're asking them to invest this money to see a return for their audience. One key thing about being the producer is gaining access. If you can deliver access to a fascinating subculture and pull back the veil on something at the right time for the right network, that is a great way as a first-time producer to break in. This also brings me to talent. A great way to break in is connecting yourself with proven talent. Now, proven talent doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and get The Rock, but a proven talent can mean someone who's written a book and is an expert in a certain type of hunting, or, you know, some sort of very specific talent that they are an expert in. The Duck Dynasty guys would be an example of talent that is non-traditional, you know, than what you're probably thinking. But that aside, if you have a series that does have a celebrity attached, that is not a bad thing and will continue to get you meetings and move the series forward in ways you wouldn't otherwise. A great way to stick a concept in a network executive's head, and also to make a great concept, is to have a personal connection to the story. Like, if you grew up in this subculture, if you grew up around this, if you truly know it and love it, whatever it might be, it will come through in your pitch and it will help network executives buy what you're selling. So you want to go in with a pitch deck, and you might even take the pitch deck to get the pitch meeting. There's a whole lot of ways to get a pitch meeting. We'll see if we get to that. But what you need to definitely have is a deck that will help the network understand what your show will look like, what type of imagery you'll see in the show, how will this make the viewer feel, and how will you pull it off. I'm gonna have some water real quick because I've been talking for I don't know how many minutes now. Awesome. And you don't want 1,000,000 words to take over the page, but you have to make sure you explain it. So it's a very, very, very fine line. I would say putting less text on opening pages, and then as you get into the deck, you can make some heavier, meatier pages when you're really explaining, you know, an episode, what an episode is, or one of the producing nuances that you want to explain how you're going to pull off. But you should always start with a log line, which is 1 to 2 sentences that includes the character, setting, conflict, and is entertaining. And then you also want to then break it down a little bit more into a synopsis. What happens in the show, and what is the series arc? Where are you taking me? Then you'll also want to explain who the characters are in the show or the talent. You'll use images, ask these characters, give me your best pictures. If it's like, you know, a teacher that you think is going to be the next, you know, celebrity, she's got a really great, authentic way of teaching kids how to cook, and she's going to be the next Emerald Lagasse or something. You know, you don't want to just Google her and take the first 4 photos that like come up that probably aren't the best. Work with your characters and your talent to get the best images you can and showcase, you know, these in your deck. You're looking for larger than life, amazing real life characters. Obviously, every network is different and nuanced, but if you're looking for TLC, one way that they've described things is if you can dress as them for Halloween, that's a character that we would have on our show. That's not necessarily true for National Geographic or Discovery, but learning these little things about networks and how big you want their characters to be is always helpful. But what you want to be able to do is make sure that the personality of the character and the talent comes through in your pitch deck on paper, whether that's through writing or images or however it is you as a producer choose to express that. One huge thing that is a sales bonus for network executives is they have to be an expert in their world, but they also have to be authentic. They don't already have to be famous, but they have to be the potential to be. Maybe they're famous in their circle, but they're not famous, nationally yet, but they're definitely famous in South Georgia, stuff like that. Paint a picture and show me as well as tell me. So that kind of also, I brought this up earlier, different networks by different types of shows, research what is getting greenlit. And I give you resources to do this later in the thing. What is in production, what is currently airing. If something is currently airing, they're not looking for more of it. That's almost always the truth. So think about what is an evolution of that and how it's going to be, what's next. Don't recreate what they have, try and complement it. For example, one show that's no longer on the air anymore, Ink Masters, but for the longest time, Spike, which is now Paramount, was looking for the perfect program to complement Ink Masters, because they could totally get people to tune in for Ink Masters, but they needed something to go after it, and they could not find it. They were not looking for another tattoo show, but there was just nothing to complement it. So, but for the longest time, if you had found whatever that show was, they would have bought it. And then just be realistic about what network would buy your programming. Food Network buys very specific type of programming. They don't buy factual programming. They buy game shows. They buy formats. Oops. And just identify who and what you're trying to communicate. What is your goal of your content? But I would always just recommend, when you're looking for things to develop into television, find stories that you think deep down inside need to be told. That's a little bit of a repeat from an earlier slide, but you want to make sure that in your deck you have a slide that goes over the format. What is the format? What happens in Act 1? What happens in Act 2? What happens in Act 3? Is it in 44 minutes? Is it 22 minutes? Are there 3 episodes? Are there 6 episodes? All of that information needs to be in there and justified why. If you're going to say it's 6 episodes, why is it 6 episodes? Not for, just because, but the content must necessitate it being 6 episodes. Then you're going to want to also have a slide that goes over the visual style. What will it look like? How will you achieve this? What camera or lenses you'll be using, editing styles. Are you bringing in other footage what you'll be creating? Is it user generated, archival? If you have access to a unique archival resource, definitely highlight that. That's very, important and popular these days. This stuff is a little less important, but, depending on the stage of the pitch deck, they're going to want to see this at some point. How long will it take to complete? Are there key dates to consider for the green lighting of production? If it's based around, the National Tractor Pull Championships every year, you can't green light it in July and expect to do it because those happen in August, for example, something like that. So you need to let networks know about this stuff so they can make their decisions appropriately as well. And legally, networks require certain documents be in order. You need to make sure you have your talent signed exclusively to you, because why would they work with you if the talent isn't tied to you? Wouldn't they just go directly to the talent or take this to a bigger production company? So it's really key and crucial that you get talent agreements signed with your key talent, or, you know, the event that you are getting access to. Whatever it is that's special about your show, you need to make sure it's locked down legally before you're going to a network with the idea, because they will expect to see that paperwork at an earlier stage than not if money is involved. And if you don't have it, you will regret it. Example episodes and storylines are important as well. What is going to happen, but you can, you know, really sell it in an entertaining way. You're not always going to need a sizzle, but it never hurts. 2 to 4 minutes max. I would say even more so these days, 2 minutes max. If you're going to go into a 5-act structure, which I like to do, is kind of say, here's my intro, and then do 3 subjects in between explaining the show, and then do a wrap up at the end into like a 5-act structure. You can get to 4 minutes, but you really need to make sure it moves. They will stop looking. They will check their email. They have phones in front of them. So, you know, really make sure that everything you're saying in your sizzle is important and entertaining. And how to create a sizzle. You can ask me more specific questions at the end, but basically how I do it is I think of what are things that already exist that look like the show that I want to make. I pull in those sources. I create VO. I use title cards, and then ripped video from other sources. Because this is only going to be seen internally. You're never going to show this anywhere. This is just for proof of concept. Optional, if you have storyboards, great. Do not waste a ton of time on them. If you have a budget, if you're like, I know I can produce this for X and that's a huge selling point, great. And then when you've completed your pitch deck, ask other producers you trust to poke holes in it. Like, what am I missing here? What am I not explaining because I'm so close to the subject? What is left unexplained? What questions will viewers and network executives ask? And then, so we've got network television. Network television is very nepotistic and very difficult to get into. If you want to pitch to networks, start working at, you know, low levels and work your way up, and make contacts from the inside. And eventually that's one way to do it. You can also just become a content producer and hope that someday your big enough agent is able to get you a meeting with them. Cable networks are more approachable. If you're a proven producer of some type, you can usually just approach a cable network executive via email. I recommend going to networking events and meeting them in person, and just becoming part of the community. Working at low levels in the industry and working your way up is a great way to, you know, just make these contacts and get people to want to listen to your ideas. And then we've talked about OTT and VOD earlier. And then obviously one of those is Netflix. Everybody wants to produce for Netflix and they have tons of money. And so there's no reason you shouldn't be considering pitching to them. Value. This slide, I meant to put more information in, sorry guys, but check out those videos. They were all quite helpful. For me, one tip, a couple tips on what not to do. Don't pitch something as another show. The most important thing is to never pitch something as No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain. there's no faster way to get a no in the room. But also, like, if your show is Project Runway plus deep sea anglers, don't tell me that, show me that. It's okay for them and they'd be like, hey, is this kind of like Project Runway for deep sea anglers? If that comes up, great. But you shouldn't be the first one to tell them, because it always leads to a I've seen this before type thing. And also in the room, avoid know-it-all syndrome. Listen to what they're saying and see if you can pivot your idea toward that, because you're almost never going to get your pitch right on the first try. In general, travel shows are tough unless there's another layer to it. Health and fitness shows are also really typically a long shot. Reality competitions shows are also very difficult to do with an unproven producer, as well as anything. I would say anything too niche for cable. With some of these digital outlets, you can begin to be more niche now. After the pitch, don't just email back asking for something, saying, hey, do you have feedback for me? Do you have something? Try and add some value to your emails and say, oh, I also saw this thing that might interest you, or congratulations on a big win for your network. Give, as well as if you're going to be asking for something, make sure you're, treating them nicely and, paying attention to them and, creating a actual relationship that could be set for solid collaboration in the future. Expect that your work will be reformatted and thought through at a network level, and don't get too attached to it. Do be passionate and proactive about getting an idea made. The goal is, after your pitch, is to engage and get a second conversation. Get them to ask you questions. It's very rare to get a yes in the room, but if they're asking you questions, that means they're intrigued. And then, why you're the best person to do this, and get them to look forward to working with you. So just be very forward thinking about the pitch. What's the next steps, and what would they like to see from you, and what can you get them to make this happen? Because what happens at a network level, they then each have ideas that they present at meetings, and whether those be paper materials, being the pitch deck, or a log line, sometimes even, or then sometimes it's a sizzle. That's how at these meetings each week, the ideas move up the chain and they funnel them up to eventually giving money to pitch tapes and proof of concepts, and sometimes then pilots. So if you want to make television, I would recommend reading all of these things. Synopsis is great. Every day it tells you what's getting greenlit, who's getting hired, who's getting fired, who's moving to new networks. Digiday is great for digital programming. Multi-channel news, very much cable networks and some digital. Tube Filter's more digital. The next two are more documentary related, but it's all kind of having an overlap these days as far as nonfiction programming. There's some more additional resources. If you are looking to create a series for digital or YouTube, this Tube Filter article is phenomenal. It basically breaks down any type of YouTube video that could ever exist. So you could find a talent and you're like, what do I do with this talent? And go through this taxonomy work that they do and find the right format for them. It's pretty fascinating. I highly recommend it. And wow, I didn't think I'd get through all of that so fast, Brianna, but I guess I'm a fast talker. So I don't even know where we go with questions. How do I look at the
Yeah, it looks like there's
bottom?
one. We'll let people pop into questions right now to see if they have any
Okay,
from
cool.
there. Yeah, and I actually had a couple too, but
Cool.
one of them is the presentation materials. Would you be able to share that? Like if we send it out along with the recording, is that okay? Or
Sorry, say that again.
your presentation materials,
Oh, the slide.
yeah, the
The
slides and stuff.
absolutely. Can
Mhm.
yeah, I assumed you had that. Sorry about that.
Oh, we may. Alex may have made them with you,
Okay,
or she probably has a copy. But
great.
I'll poke her just because that's the first question on there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I had a few questions. I'll just while people pop in to get us
Great.
started. One of them is you mentioned you mentioned getting a pitch meeting, pitching with people. So a lot of our writers are like unrepresented at the moment.
Right.
So let's assume, what are some ways that you might suggest to possibly that aren't just cold calls, or maybe are.
Great. No, I would say start going to network events. One great event in New York that I don't go to enough, but I need to, is Video Consortium. And just going and meeting people at network drinks. And you find those by reading those resources that I mentioned. And then also as you if you go to film screenings, meeting the filmmaker, talking to the filmmaker if you really like their work. It's really, really, really does come down to just going out there and meeting people that you want to work with. So it's like, if you think about where do network executives go to meet people, they go to networking events to meet people. I mean, they don't want to be ambushed at their coffee, but the appropriate ways to approach them would be, via a cold email or through a networking event. A lot of those are through on those lists that I mentioned in the slideshow.
Great. So there's a question here from Bernie. Are pitch decks useful for writers when pitching scripts? Only in person or phone internet pitches?
Scripts.
So if you're just pitching a script, would you suggest having a sort of the thorough pitch deck you just went through? For writers.
Well, this is for unscripted, so I am unclear on what kind of script you're asking about, I guess.
Yeah, my guess is, and Bernie, you can clarify, but my guess is, do you think like everyone who pitches for a script, do you think everyone who pitches would want or need to have
you think in that if you are in fiction?
Yeah, I think so.
I would say,
and Bernie, clarify if not, but yes.
Yeah, okay, I see these now.
Okay, great.
Sorry, okay, so I would say it cannot hurt because it explains your idea further. And even if it doesn't help sell the idea, it will help you understand your idea better. Because when you're writing this all out and getting it down to a really concise log line and a really concise synopsis, that you're like excited to show someone else, it helps you then more fully understand the idea as well. But if any materials you can have that help communicate your idea are, I think, helpful. Okay, so then I go to Gerald, right?
Yeah. I'll let you do it. I'll be here.
Okay. Might I ask if there's a pitch subject that surprised you as different than what you've heard before, and most importantly was produced? Well, I mean, I think I understand the question. Let me see if that's right. Well, for example, I was really excited and surprised that Cheer got made because it was so good. And they allowed it to be made in the deeply verite way that they made it. So that one, I was really surprised that it got to air. And by air, I mean Netflix, in the amazing condition that it did. Because normally what would happen with a show like Cheerleading is they wouldn't they would want you to produce the Dallas Cowboys version of that. And so that was a surprise for me. And Gerald, if that's not right, come back in at the end, but I think that might have answered it. Bernie, as far as networking events for people not in the Hollywood area, yeah, I would say there's always a local film community around you, and that's a great place to start. But then there's also online communities for everything, I know. I mean, I'm sure if you go on Reddit, there's sub Reddits about networking events for people who are not in the area, not in Hollywood areas. But I will say face-to-face, you can't really beat face-to-face networking. And so I would just look for events in your local area, and, you know, each local area is a little bit different on that. Lena, my show got picked up by a production company. Congratulations. And we signed a contract this Friday. We are working on a pitch deck. Perfect. Amazing. Packaging. Main actresses. Manager. Working for a manager. Sorry. When I'm looking for a manager, which I am right now, can I use a pitch deck? Or how can I use my current situation that I find it so managers are tough. I don't have a manager. I don't really know anyone who has a manager that likes it or needs one until you get much busier. Are you talking more about managers for the actresses? Or yeah. I would say as an unscripted producer, you don't need a manager. You need a lawyer more than anything. You need a lawyer for your contracts, but I wouldn't say you need a manager. But if I'm also understanding the question differently, you can use the pitch deck for the show to approach talent for your pitch, which I think is useful. Oh, thank you, Gerald. I'm subletting for 2 months in between apartments, but thank you. I will let them know she's her name is Edith.
So I have another question for you,
yes.
Just based on what popped up. So you mentioned not saying comps in unscripted TV, like not saying, well, it's no reservations with Anthony Bourdain for
right.
like obvious reasons. But will you talk a little bit about that more? Just because in the fiction world, which is where we do a lot of stuff, it's like we're always like, say it's this meets this. So I'm really curious, just if you can talk a little more about why.
I don't know why they just it loses their. It's like it's okay if they come up with the idea, right? And it's on a lot of this stuff. It's like if the network executive comes up with it, it's brilliant. But also, I think one thing, if you're saying it's like this plus this, sometimes the rest of the pitch doesn't show it enough. And so that is really therein, I think, lies the problem. It doesn't show me enough what it is because you're leaning on the simple comparison. And pitch decks take a long, long time. So don't beat yourself up if it like you need to put it down for a week and come back to it. They really can break you. But they are really important to just keep concise, but also clear and creative. It's very, very, very nuanced, like what you should and shouldn't put in there sometimes, but it all comes down to your concept as well. And you have to go with your gut and, like always ask yourself, is this enhancing someone wanting to buy this idea? Like, is this enhancing the explanation of my concept? Will someone understand this more, or does this create more confusion and does adding this create more questions than it's worth as well? But yeah, I really wish I knew. I would love to get in a room with like someone who's both worked in the unscripted and scripted world at a network level and find out why that is. They don't like that. It's just, yeah.
That's funny. So I have a question too. Just I'm curious, like how you got into this world specifically, and
Right.
what draws you towards the narrative of unscripted versus, the more fictional world
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, no, I grew up on a farm in Ohio with no cable. And so we had like 5 channels, and I just watched a lot of PBS, and I went to college wanting to live in a big city and be a lawyer. And it was really, 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 really hot one day in class. And I was like, oh, I can't take it. And I was thinking about how long it was going to take me to be a lawyer. And I realized 7 years of waiting to live my life was not going to work. And so I started exploring what else, like what I deeply wanted to do, why I wanted to be a lawyer. And I wanted to be a lawyer so I could help people in need. And so that led me to documentary film. And then from documentary film, I kind of got involved in, getting a career that pays money. So from there, I kind of ended up in unscripted television and trying to stay as true to my documentary roots as possible in that. But yeah, I started off, I was in college and I did an internship in New York between my sophomore and junior year, went back, graduated college, moved to New York, started working at a boutique political advertising firm. And then we did a lot of corporate promos for like ABC. And then I started working on A&E biographies back when those were a thing. And then I did 2 longer form biographies about Animal House and the making of Jaws, the movie. And then from there, I kind of was steadily associate producing on different things. And then from there, associate producing to producing. And then from producing to development producing. And then from development producing to running an unscripted development department to now just kind of going between development of my own ideas, development of other people's ideas, and producing things that have been greenlit. So, and that's taken, I started, my internship was in 2004. And so, yeah, 2004 is when I first really started networking and making contacts and building relationships and going from there.
That's cool. Thank you. I have another question for you, just about you touched on this when already, but I'm curious if you'll delve into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's like the idea of adding what structures we understand in the fiction world, like narrative structures, into unscripted television. So like your act 1, anyone who's ever binged The Real Housewives, which I'm not, but I have, knows that there's like, there's the teaser, then there's that, like, there's a very clear structure. How much of that do you need to know, like going in, being like, okay, it's a host show. This is how we structure it. This is act 1. Like comedy has 3 acts and a teaser and
right. Well, you really, like, if it's a format, you need to know that, like, so with Housewives, for example, that's a
which I don't watch.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's in this sense, it's easier to speak with specifics. So, like, for example, with Housewives, you don't need to know who's going to be in a conflict each week, but you do know there's going to be a conflict and it's going to resolve, but maybe also carry on into that season. So that is a true docu-soap. Like, every episode, the same thing does not happen, right? Mm-hmm. And for that one, you're selling that shot concept way more on the talent and the characters and the insanity of it all and the lavishness. But I'm trying to think of then another example, like Pawn Stars, you are going to sell that heavily on what happens already. And these are the decisions that the producer has to make. You can't go in being wishy-washy about it, because you can't, like, if they tried to sell Pawn Stars as a docusoap, it wouldn't have gotten made. Pawn Stars got made because there's built-in moments of reward and people getting a payoff. So that was sold not only based on the characters. The characters were important, but the format was equally as important. So if they had gone into Pawn Stars and been like, we're just going to hang around this Pawn Star shop all day and shit's going to get crazy, that's not going to sell. But if we're going to spend time in this pawn shop with these crazy people. Here's their big personalities, right? Every episode, you're going to see 3 customers come in. Regiment, I'm blanking a little bit on the format, but every episode, you're going to see 3 customers come in. They're going to have their thing evaluated, and then we're going to reveal to them. There's always a reveal, the reveal is very important. Reveal to them, the worth of the value of the item, and then they have to decide whether or not to sell it. That's the format. But if you had just said, customers are going to come in and we might buy some stuff, they might buy some stuff. That's different, and that's not going to sell. So it's as being specific as possible about format. And then every episode, like Storage Wars, every episode, what's going to happen. Like, for me, it's very, very difficult to watch unscripted television because, as I say, I know how the sausage is made, if you will, now. And it's very much like frustrating, except Storage Wars is one of those that I can sit and watch, even though I know exactly what's going to happen. Even though I know they've gone and they've planted this stuff in there, I don't care. I can still watch it. And that's because there's this something about a format like that where what's going to happen, but it's going to be something different, just a little bit each time, that is perfect for cable television. And that's what they want.
You touched on this just now, but how important is it, like, when you pitch traditionally, we often say, like, tell us every episode, this is what happens in the pilot, and every episode after this happens. And then we usually, like, encourage people to say season 1 is this, and then show story engines for future seasons. Do you find that narrative to be as important in unscripted? I'm obviously the every episode thing, but the overarching season narrative?
Always, if you see potential beyond what is on the page, like there's a spin-off option, on, this can also be on a boat. We can take it to Alaska. They love Alaska. I don't know why, guys. And I have asked this every update call I get. I'm like, is Alaska still a thing? And they're like, yes. It just doesn't matter what it is. If it's in Alaska, it's extra good and has a better chance of selling. But back to what you were saying. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
So season arcs, do you find them important?
Yeah, it depends on the type of the series. Like, if it's an arc series where that's important, where it's very important where you end up on episode 10, absolutely, how can we do this again? But then, let's say, for Pawn Stars, you don't need to tell me that it's going to be replicatable, because it's replicatable. It's never going to be anything other than what it is in one episode, just slightly tweaked, So always being able to show the potential for, I would say for them, it's more potential for spin-offs and potential for different characters to grow into different shows.
So sort of along those lines, when we're talking structure on networks and understanding, okay, this is a Food Network show or whatever it is you're pitching, and having a sense of that. How do you make a pitch really stand out? Like, because you want it to be exactly what they have, but you also want it to be different, right? And so how do you say, like, listen, we're doing, you don't compare it, but you're like, oh, it's about a former journalist who travels the world and can get along with anyone and eat anything. you know, but you don't say no reservations.
Yep.
Like, how do you get them excited? For instance, with specifically the example that I'm thinking of is like for Travel Channel, because I love ghost stories. So Travel Channel is my other like vice. And so I just can't get enough. I don't care if it's real. I know that I don't care, but they're all like variations of the same thing. So if you go in and pitch, how do you go, we're going to give you exactly what you want, but it's different. Like as a producer, how do you approach that?
That is the tough question. And what the most annoying feedback to get that I've gotten dozens of times is, this is great. It's exactly what we're looking for, but it doesn't raise the bar. So you really need to be thinking about it's so tough. That's why if this were easy, everyone would be doing it. But it's thinking about how to raise the bar on what they already have. So sometimes that's just literally taking what they have and adding a bigger talent, or connecting it to something more historical and active. Really popular right now are anything active investigation that will lead to a resolve. If it won't lead to a resolve, it's not going to be an easy sell. And obviously, finding an active investigation that has a guaranteed resolve is very difficult. But again, that leads me to, if this were easy, we'd all be, selling shows every day. But it's really, really popular right now. Just know that in any network would buy something that is an active investigation at this moment, which is unusual to say. There's rarely something that they're all doing.
Yeah. Looks like Jerry has a question about planted material. So just how much of planted material, as you mentioned in talking about Storage Wars, is okay? And is that then considered scripted?
That's going to be a line that you as a producer decide for yourself. There is a far range of scruples in this industry, and you'll find that in every facet. But I would say generally you would work that out with each network on what they're comfortable with. But Discovery networks tend to be okay with a little bit of fudging on formats. It also depends on the type of show. If you're billing something as a true documentary show, and then you planted the thing you were looking for, there's no bueno, you can't do that. But in something like Storage Wars, to make it a little more exciting, adding this Mickey Mantle baseball card is a little more forgivable. So there's a spectrum, and I think you got to go with your gut and work with the network on something like that. But also, don't sell a show on something that's totally fake. You'll regret that. You'll never work in the industry again.
I know all my ghost stories are absolutely not made up, and they don't do anything to them, and I don't want to hear otherwise. So I don't want to hear it. I don't. Every episode something happens. So that's how ghosts work. They respond to cues. Don't you dare tell me otherwise. Even though I know it, I know
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's a good point, Jerry. Like in the paranormal shows, everything is forgiven. Everything is forgiven.
Because maybe at some point something did happen.
Right, exactly.
That's all. Ghosts are real. Anyway, I'm getting on. So I have a couple more questions for you while I have you. So there's a lot of talk sometimes in the unscripted world and I'm specifically thinking The Bachelor right now, of how so much of the story is told in the editing room later. So how do you sell a show of similar format? Maybe you don't. Maybe The Bachelor is its own thing, but I do feel like there's something about like how the editing room really can help you with the narrative along.
And I would say that would be something that you put in your pitch or show somehow in your sizzle. Absolutely. I mean, I would say it has to help you. I mean, you have to have a solid editor, and you have to have, that's also part of being a producer, is in the field, getting everything you're possibly going to need in the field. So when you're back in the edit room, you're like, good, I know delaying lunch that day by 2 hours was a real dick move, but everybody got real cranky and I got the footage I needed. That's producing decisions that, again, is a level of scruples that you will encounter along the way. But it's every decision you make as a producer has an effect on the end product. So like what you're deciding to do in the field has repercussions for what you have to work with in the edit. And what you're saying is, how do you want to set yourself up basically for the best success in the edit. There's a joke which I'm sure you may have already heard, but in unscripted TV, where we're just like, we'll fix it in post. And like, it just, you can't do it after a while. There's only so much that can be done. But you're right. A lot of what, also, if you're implementing voiceover in your show, that is something that you want to include in your pitch deck, and can also be used as a mechanism for narrative storytelling. So that's just another thing, like, who's the narrator? Is it the host? Is it someone that's like an omniscient God? Like, what is being told to me, and how is it being told, I guess, is the essence of it.
So a question about podcasts for you, specifically because it's like open investigations that could be closed or whatever. Because a lot of people, we talk podcasts a lot, and even with our, in our scripted world and stuff, but do producers scour podcasts? Would it be a good idea if you, like,
I would
if
say
someone...
they're like, anything can be a great idea for a television show that you're unaware of, honestly. Like, it can be a blurb in a local newspaper that's this big, but podcasts are great. True crime is big right now. If you can get connected to a podcast producer that already has a ton of research and wants to do a pitch for a sizzle, you can then team up, if they have the access to the subject or something that's crucial, like a tape or something that makes it more than just the retelling of a crime. If it's just the retelling of a crime, that's not enough anymore. It needs to be, we've got this piece of thing that in real time is going to help us uncover the killer. So podcasts are a great place to look, especially with there being so many more. And there's no wrong way to go about looking for ideas. Your neighbor could be an idea, who knows?
Well, my neighbor might be haunted, so, but maybe it's
no,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, and then my last question.
Show My Haunted Neighbor.
Oh my God.
Like,
my haunted roommate is something I've been working on forever. So
perfect.
Because I lived with a ghost for a period of time. Listen, we're getting sidetracked, but I did live with a ghost and it was fine. But it'd be a great show, right?
Absolutely. I agree. I have not heard that one.
Good. See, that's maybe I'll take it to Travel Channel.
Exactly.
So my last question is really, and if other people have questions, please pop them in. The last kind of question on my end is, it seems like between like early documentaries to where we're at now, the landscape has changed so much. Do you see any upcoming trends people might be able to like hop on? Obviously, it's going to be totally different. You've mentioned true crime,
right?
Stuff, but do you see just like landscape wise, like Netflix is obsessed with this?
I think a lot of like right now, I'm seeing and hearing a little bit like antiques are back, like in a way, like the like this, like the Japanese geisha back there, like collectibles, I think there's going to be some trends rising on with that. We'll see. We'll talk in 6 months. I think there's a lot of shows going into production about the objects we keep and antiques and reuse, and a lot of it's not really a genre, it's more of a space, and like not taking old things and making them new again, but not in a flea market flip kind of way. So I'm seeing those trends kind of move forward, but nothing has been aired yet, just a little bit of green lights and castings.
Cool.
So.
And you mentioned like a little bit when you were just talking about the overall structures at the beginning, that it had already changed so much and it was changing. Do you see that on your end, just like, I guess, demand wise? Like, is there less demand? Because it was obviously a boom for a while of like,
no, actually,
everything
I
was
think
unscripted.
right now is the busiest I've seen it in the 15 years I've ever been.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's right now is, I think, the busiest time for unscripted that I've seen, especially with like all of these new digital platforms, the OTT platforms. There's like an all HD one, like really do your research and look into what is out there. There's so many different places. It's crazy. Like, and Quibi right now is only working with huge producers, but eventually that has to trickle down. They have a lot of money and they're going to need a lot of content. So, shoot for the stars. You never know.
And then I have one more. Sorry, I know I just
said we got time.
Do you guys, this is just curious, do you unionize? Like, do producers in unscripted unionize, or is it, because I know the talent typically aren't.
No, but we don't really have it producing an unscripted, there's not great conditions to look forward to.
Sure. But that also means the Wild West. So like, anyone could, there's like no barrier to entry to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, when you're at the lower levels, look out for yourself. No company will look out for you, but there is money to be made in selling shows. And, once you get up there, but you will have to go through the meat grinder to work your way up there. Unfortunately, the unscripted world does not have as many labor protections.
So it might be an actual meat grinder, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it might actually be. Okay. So just, stand up for yourself.
Okay, cool. I know there was one other question Jerry sent, but I asked him to clarify and I just didn't, so I wasn't sure. No, it was something about like political ideas. I don't know what you meant, Jerry, but do you have any thoughts on like do political ideas often sell? Obviously it's a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah, I would say it really comes and goes with the marketplace. You're going to need to make sure you've got like the right talent for that. I think political ideas really do rest on the talent, and that's why the circus got made, because of who those guys are. There has been some other political stuff, but I mean, I haven't really seen much that has worked. So never say never. I would say never say never.
Yeah, especially if you said it in Alaska, you know what I mean? So.
And then, there's all these ways to sell content. Maybe you're making a long form documentary that you're going to sell to Netflix. There's different ways to produce this. Jerry, are we answering that question? Yeah. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's under answer, or I put it under answer when I typed it, but yeah.
Okay.
I think it's, yes. Okay. He said yes. Okay, good, Jay.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Great. Yeah. Any last thoughts? That's it. This is the wrap. So any thoughts?
Let me think. I would say, just don't get too attached to your ideas. Like it, and also development takes a really, 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 really long time. So don't get too emotional about it, because I have, and it hurts. So stay strong, and eventually you'll sell something, and it'll feel really good.
Well, thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.